Hey guys, welcome back to Sports with Mono and Mono. It's January 8th, 2022, and I'm actually solo again this week because my partner is ill. Again, we keep talking about this COVID situation, and unfortunately it's real. It's a big deal, and I wish him a speedy recovery, but I'm also going to put this out there. Today's show is dedicated to my brother, Chris, who also is dealing with a serious case of this COVID, and, it's heartbreaking. It hits close to home when it happens to somebody that you know and love, and, he's a fighter. So, he's in some major distress at this time, but like I said, he's a tough guy, and hopefully he can get through this. And our best wishes certainly go out to both my brothers in this crazy time that we're in. So that aside, let's start off with our monologue this week. And I was reluctant to even talk about it because I just can't figure this Antonio Brown situation out. I mean, either the guy is sick. I don't know. I mean, I know this CTE stuff is no joke, but there's two things that could be in play here. He is dealing with a mental illness, and if that's the case, it needs to be treated because, what we saw him do the other day in Giant Stadium was unbelievable. It's something that you never really even see, but it happened. Walking off the field in the middle of the game, and, he's saying that, he was injured and couldn't play, but you know what? He didn't look injured to me when he was jogging off the field and putting on this show. So there's two things. Maybe he is ill, but he's been given a lot of different chances, and this should be the last chance for him, because if he's sick, then he doesn't deserve to be playing in this league. He should be seeking help, or he's just an ass H, which is also possible. So I don't know what to make of it. It is something that was shocking to see, and there's a situation that we're talking about between mental illness, and we've talked about it on the show before. The CTE stuff is a real scenario. There's no denying that. You could reference Junior Seau and those guys. It is one of the possibilities that you go into these kind of physical sports and just have head trauma over and over again. It's a real thing, so I don't dismiss that, but I don't know if that's the case or if this guy is just an incorrigible person, and I don't know how many more chances he can get. I really don't. It's just something that we saw, and it was amazing to see, and like I said, if he is dealing with a mental illness, hopefully he gets treatment, but if it's not that, and he's just a horrible teammate or just not committed to the game, then he doesn't deserve another chance in this league. He's been given multiple ones. So that's my thoughts on that situation. It was crazy to see, but like I said, I don't know. I think this is 3 strikes you're out for Mr. Brown. So let's move on to our college football, because there's a big game this week, obviously. And our college football segment is sponsored by Coriano Trucking of Summerhill, New York. We said, whatever it is, wherever it's got to go and whenever it's got to get there, that's the company to do it, Coriano Trucking. So we thank them for their sponsorship. So a couple of things in college football. First and foremost, there was a lot of bowl games. We talked about it. There were over 40 of them. But I tell you, the Rose Bowl game was awesome. I mean, what a comeback by Ohio State. One of the best Rose Bowls I can remember in a very long time. And, like I said, we have a special interest in Ohio State. It was um, one of our friends' son is the starting center, and we've mentioned Luke before, and he played a great game, and Ohio State never quit. They just never quit, and it came back. It was just an amazing game. Um, Contrary to the Notre Dame game, Notre Dame had this game looked like it was well in hand, and unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. They ended up losing the game. But this was Marcus Freeman's first game as a head coach, so he's going to learn. That it's 60 minutes of football. That's you got to play. You can't let up at all. So disappointing loss for him. But I think, as we talked about, as shocking as Brian Kelly was that he was leaving, I think this is going to be a good era for Notre Dame football to bounce back. And that was a tough loss that they suffered on New Year's Day. But the big game, of course, is Alabama, Georgia. And you know what? From a national championship perspective, they got this right. We talked about it. Michigan got crushed by Georgia. My philosophy. I don't bet against Nick Saban, but I also am a big fan of Kirby Smart. I think Kirby is an outstanding coach. He's got a great team. It should be a great game. But the way I look at it, Alabama, you got, they could put up a lot of points even against a great defense, and that's what Georgia has. They got a great defense. Got to give Stetson Bennett credit. I mean, he played phenomenal against Michigan, but I don't know that they could pull that off again. So, I mean, the way I look at it, if I had my last $5 in my pocket and I had to place it, I'd put it on Alabama. Kirby is 0-7 against Nick Saban, but again, none of that really matters when it gets down to it. You got to play the game between the lines, and for sure, it's going to be a great game. I'm going to go with Alabama here because I just don't know that Georgia could put up that kind of offensive display against the Nick Saban coach team. So it should be a great game. It's Monday night, and we'll be talking about it for sure next week. But they got it right. These are the two best teams, and when it works out that way, I did, with all due respect, I did say that I thought Michigan had a chance to beat Georgia, but they didn't. So let's see what happens on Monday night. It's going to be a great game. I wish it was, an earlier game because it's on so late at night. But I think everyone will stay up and watch it. And I look for Alabama to win the national championship. And we'll talk about it if I'm wrong next week. A couple other things in. We've been talking about college football, in particular this transfer thing. And one of the big news was Caleb Williams from Oklahoma enters the transfer portal. And, this is big news. This is, people have been using the term, and rightfully so. It's called free agency in college football. You can pretty much go wherever you want. So, this guy was, it's a great story. He's a good kid. But he's all signs indicate that he's going to go with Lincoln Riley to USC. I mean, nothing has been discussed, nothing has been announced, but I think that's the logical place he's going to end up. Guys, he was recruited by Lincoln Riley, and now that they have the opportunity to leave at will, and you don't have to sit out a year anymore, look for that to happen. I can't see him ending up anywhere else but USC, but we'll never know. And there was one other interesting thing because, when I first saw it, Kirk Herbstreit made a statement that these kids today who are opting out of bowl games don't have the passion that the former, from Kirk Herbstreit's days, they don't seem to. His contention was that they don't have this commitment or the passion to play. And I think it's a little bit different. At first I said, you know what, I think he's right because when you're a team guy and you're sitting out, but what's at stake? tons of money. That's what's at stake, right? And so at first I said I thought I agreed with him, and I'm not so sure I do anymore. I think in a perfect case is the Ole Miss quarterback, Matt Corral, who was potentially a number one pick, played in the bowl game, got hurt. That could sideline him and his chances of making the NFL, because you never know. Don't know how serious the injury is, but it's possible. But you know what? I think when so much money is on the line, I think I do understand, and I don't necessarily think it's that they don't have the passion. I think they're just being careful, and we never really saw this. I think the first time we saw a player opt out was Christian McCaffrey, and he's been injured on and off, throughout his college career, but I think we're going to see more and more of this. We saw it with Kenny Pickett from Pitt. Those kind of players, their future is on the line. So I'm not sure, if I was in that position, would I opt out? I'm going to say probably not, because I have this love for the game and my teammates. But it's a different story when you're faced with this kind of financial sacrifice if something does go wrong. So, I hope Matt Corral, his injury isn't serious, but I think I do understand, and I don't necessarily know, if it's a question of commitment rather than from a financial commitment. So, a lot of things going on in college football. So, but like I said, the big game this week, and it's Alabama, Georgia, the number 1, number 2 team, and it should be a great game. Looking forward to it, and feel free to send comments to our mailbox at sportswithmano@gmail.com. Give me your thoughts on players opting out and Antonio Brown. I'm sure you guys got points you'd like to make, but again, this is a talk show that we make our opinions based on what we see, and like I said, everybody has an opinion. Would love to hear from you. So we get down to the final week of the NFL. Like I said, there's a lot of playoff implications going on. Saturday football, always great. Usually the second to last and last week of the NFL season. So I think there's a big game today. Is the Cowboys and the Eagles. And I got to tell you, I'm really impressed with the way Jalen Hurts has been playing. And he's a really, really good kid, too. So I'm not going to be surprised. I'll give you the NFL picks in a little bit. But I'm not going to be surprised. Like I said, I think Dallas has just been too inconsistent throughout the year. One week they look unstoppable. Another week they look very beatable. So, that's a big game today. And, I think the other big game that's on the line is the Raiders. Raiders, they win, they're in. All this nonsense about a tie and then both of them get in. I mean, how often does a tie happen in the NFL? I mean, is that really a possibility? Absolutely not. So let's see what the Raiders can do. I mean, it's been a crazy year for the Raiders. But I think they have an opportunity. And but I tell you, the way Justin Herbert's been playing, I don't know that they could do it. They've been rather inconsistent, just like the Cowboys. But I think they can. I think the Raiders have a good chance to back into the playoffs. And like I said, after such a tumultuous year. But again, I'm just not 100% sold on David Carr yet. So, this is a big moment for him to step up. So let's see how that goes. A couple other things. When you look back on the season, and he's starting to get a lot of heat, is this Baker Mayfield. I wasn't 100% sold on him when, as the number 1 pick in the draft. But they had a team that was, with all indications, where they were going to be a formidable team, and they just probably the most disappointing team in the league this year. And this is going to have to, you're coming up for a new contract. Well, let's see how it goes. I mean, are they going to be committed to this guy? This is already his fourth year in the league, and they gave him all the tools, and he just hasn't come through. So, that's going to be a big question for the Cleveland Browns, whether they make that investment in him or not. I don't question the kid. He's a tough kid. He's a fiery kid, but does he have what it takes to win in this league like an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady? I don't know. Do you invest $40 million in this guy for an annual, which is pretty much the going rate for quarterbacks in this league? Who knows? Disappointing team though. But you got to look out for the way the Kansas City Chiefs have bounced back from a very slow start in the beginning of the season, and they're a team to be reckoned with. When you look on paper, the Buffalo Bills seem to have what it takes. This guy Josh Allen is having a great season, but again, just like the Cowboys, a little bit inconsistent. I'm not 100% sold that they have what it takes to even get past Kansas City. Again, but also one of the other sleepers is the Titans. They're getting Derrick Henry back. But again, when you look at it, is Ryan Tannehill going to make that leap into the next echelon of quarterbacks? I've always liked the kid. I think he didn't have much of a supporting cast when he was in Miami, but he's been playing great. But I think they're going to need Derrick Henry to get that far. So, those are the three teams that are going to, fight it out for the Super Bowl in the AFC. And, obviously the two teams in the NFC. Again, I told you Dallas, I don't think has any level of consistency to challenge either the Packers or the Bucks. And, when you look at what's going on with Green Bay and the season that Aaron Rodgers has, I'm not a big fan of the way he's been, portraying himself, to be quite honest, but I can't deny he's a great quarterback. And he seems to be pretty determined to win this Super Bowl. And, that's going to send a message to pretty much everybody that, this guy is the real deal. Whether he's back in Green Bay next year or not, I'm going to say no, because, there's so many things that he was adamant about against, the management of the Green Bay Packers, but his performance on the field, undeniable. Just a great season for him. And obviously you can't discount Tom Brady. You don't bet against Tom Brady no matter what. But in this case, that should be a great championship season. NFC championship final, if it is indeed the Packs and the Bucks, which it looks like it's going to be. So, again, we're wrapping up. This is the first 17-game season of the NFL. Let's see how it pans out. From a New York perspective, the Giants and Jets, just horrible. Just horrible. Excuse me. They just need so much work. I think the Giants have to move on from this Joe Judge. The more and more I hear him talk, the less and less I think he has a clue of what it takes to be an NFL coach. So I think they got to move on from him. And I know this has been, between the McAdoos and the Shermers and now the Judge, obviously Gettleman will be gone. But I think it's a package deal. I think Judge has got to go. And listen, the Jets, Robert Saleh, I do think he's a little in over his head too. But I think one season is not indicative of whether or not he could do this or not. So I think he deserves a second season at least. But I think just like Judge, his second season, no better than the first. So a lot going on. And there was one interesting thing, and I saw this, and it goes to show that sometimes people have short memories. This Ben Roethlisberger, who's for the most part, he just played his last game, today be his last game. in the league, and he's revered in Pittsburgh. But I think from a short-term memory perspective, remember, there was just so many charges and accusations against him. I can never put that out of my mind. And he seems to be like he's turned it around, but it doesn't dismiss what he's potentially done in the past. And some of the allegations against him in the past were just, if indeed they were true, just horrifying. But he has, been the model citizen since, and he's definitely going to the Hall of Fame. He's been a great quarterback, but you know what? It seems like everybody's forgot the past, and it's hard for me to forget the past. So I don't have a problem with him on the field. He's a quality guy from a quarterback perspective, but I just, I think you got to take a half a step back and say, wait a minute, this guy did some bad things in days past, and it seems like everyone in Pittsburgh's forgot. Anyway, he's going to the Hall of Fame, no question about it. So before we even close out the NFL, with this COVID situation, it's quite possible. It's going crazy again. Will it be a packed stadium for the Super Bowl? All indications are they're going to make sure that they pack that stadium, but I don't know if it's the right move, especially since, what I mentioned earlier with, people close to me suffering from this thing. This stuff is no joke. I don't think there's any possibility that they would relocate the Super Bowl to some place that's not being affected by this COVID in any way. I'm not sure there is a place, but let's see how that pans out. We got about 4 weeks before the Super Bowl, but the way things have been going, you just never know. So let's see how that works out. And I apologize for the little mild cough still suffering from, but just one of the effects of this COVID situation. A couple of quick things. Move on to the NBA. And again, NBA, not my favorite topic. And I'm not going to even bring up the fact that the Nets kind of backed off their original thought about not letting this guy Kyrie Irving be a part-time player, but I think they realized that, half a player is better than no player at all. We've never on this show questioned that he's a great basketball player, but I think it sends the wrong message. Either you're in or you're not in, and he's in part-time. So I don't get that, and it's only going to help the Nets. I still think the Nets are going to contend for the title this year. And again, like I brought up last time, I'm backpedaling on my Lakers thing. The Lakers have just almost aged right before our eyes, so they're not going to be a factor, especially with Klay Thompson coming back for the Warriors, who, you know what, when I think about what this guy has been through, and he is a classy kid. He just comes, he doesn't make the show about him. He's a great basketball player, and, he's been through an Achilles and an ACL, and he's just battling back, and he looks like he's ready to get back on the court, and that's great for the NBA, because when you get quality guys like him, it only represents the league in a positive way, and I'm really happy that he's coming back. On the injury front, something, this Zion Williamson thing, very interesting, because you know what? I can't help but think back when Sam Bowie was in the league, and he had this stress fracture in his leg, and he just never became the player he was supposed to be. I think he was actually drafted before Michael Jordan. But this situation with Zion Williamson, nobody thought that this injury that he had was going to be potentially career-ending. But it's quite possible that this is way worse than we were led to believe. This guy probably not going to play this season at all, and I'm not even sure there's any reason to bring them back at this point because they're not a team that's in contention. But you got to keep an eye on this guy. He had so much promise. One of the more hyped up players coming into the league, and he just can't seem to stay healthy on this. And this could possibly be a long-term thing, and he may not turn out to be the player that we anticipated he would be. But like I said, a couple other quick things in the NBA. And the Dallas Mavericks retired Dirk Nowitzki. And on our show, we love guys that are classy, well-spoken, and just come to work and play hard. And that's the kind of guy he was for, I don't know, 20 plus years, 19, 20 years in the league, getting his number retired by the Mavericks, and rightfully so. The guy's a Hall of Famer, just one of the great players, of our generation, and actually surprised. I would have thought he would have gotten more NBA titles, but he did win one, so he's cemented his legacy as a winner and a classy guy, and that's the right thing to do for the Mavericks. They don't have a great history. There's a couple other guys, I think Rolando Blackman, Derek Harper, and Brad Davis are the other guys that have, I'm not sure, Brad Davis deserves to have his number retired in the same breath with Dirk Nowitzki, but they did the right thing, and congratulations to him. He really was a classy guy throughout his entire career, and that's good to see. And you know what? There was one other game that was interesting, and it happened to be pretty much only the other game that I actually watched this year. The Knicks were down by 25 points to Boston, and they ended up pulling it out on this, crazy circus shot by R.J. Barrett, who my brother still thinks is going to be a great player in this league, and I just think not so much. But it was like one of the first time in 100 and some odd games that a team comes back and down by 25, but it seems like they have Boston's number this year. So it was actually a great game. And as they say, their garden was a rockin'. But I don't think the Knicks have a lot of other things to be optimistic about this year, but it was a great game. So, folks, let's move on real quick to the National Hockey League, because we talked about it a little bit last week. A lot of games have been postponed or canceled, but they're going to get this season in. And we talked about it, about the Olympics, and that's not going to happen. But the Rangers still look great. They obviously took a loss to the Golden Knights the other night, but overall, they look like a really, really good team. And but again, hockey is being affected by COVID. Connor McDavid, the latest guy to go back into COVID protocols and so forth. So we keep bringing this up. There's a lot more Canadian teams in the NHL, obviously, than any other sport. So it's being hit harder than all the other sports, but it's a real thing. And they're going to get this season in, but you're going to start seeing more and more guys are going to get this COVID thing, and it could affect the balance of power in this league. But it's been a great season so far, especially if you're a Ranger fan. And of course, Steve has been adamant about Ovechkin, and he's having a great season. And if Wayne Gretzky says he hopes you break his record, then I hope he does too. Although I still don't think it's going to happen. I think it's too far off. But hockey is really underway, and it's looking good. We go to Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball, unfortunately, there's really nothing to talk about. Again, we don't have any indication if these guys are sitting down at the table to hammer out this collective bargaining agreement, so the lockout continues. And really, as far as free agent signings, everything remains on hold. So Major League Baseball better start getting their act together, because the longer this goes on, It's going to run into spring training. It's going to affect the free agent, and overall, it's going to affect, whether teams like the Yankees can get back in this mix. Because, if we go into the season as a Yankee fan, you're going to say, well, it's going to be the same story as last year, and that's absolutely right. So, note to Major League Baseball. And I wanted to bring one other thing up regarding Major League Baseball was, apparently Rob Manfred, the commissioner, doesn't like people criticizing him. So Ken Rosenthal was the latest victim of, if you say something against the league, and yeah, Major League Baseball owns the Major League Baseball network, MLB network, but they fired Ken Rosenthal for his opinions, and I just don't know if that was a good PR move for baseball. Like I said, it seems like everything Manfred does is reflects bad on this league. So I think he ought to focus more on getting these owners and players together and hammer out this collective bargaining agreement, because the longer it goes on, the more it's going to affect baseball season as it rapidly approaches. And our Major League Baseball segment, of course, is sponsored by Lynch Toyota of Manchester, Connecticut. And, loyal sponsor of the show. And, if you're looking for a Toyota, that's the place to go. Lynch Toyota. Moving on, real quick, the whole Novak Djokovic situation. It's interesting, to say the least. He just thought he was going to waltz into Australia. I mean, the guy is just adamant about breaking the overall major records. But Australia has been one of the hardest hit countries with this COVID situation. So, my initial thought was, wait a minute, these guys are going to regret letting this guy, because he's the number one player in the world, bypass the rules. And Rafael Nadal came out and said, yeah, hey, he knew what the rules were, and, he made the decision. So I think it was great that Australia said, you know what, not so fast. You're not God, so you can't just waltz in and break the rules because of who you are, regardless of the event. And it doesn't look like he's going to be in the Australian Open, which I think is a great move. I can't deny how great a tennis player he is. There's no question about that. But his, the way he comes across, it just rubs everybody the wrong way. And, hopefully, Federer and Nadal can come back, because I would love for them to retire as the all-time major winners rather than Djokovic. But Djokovic is a little bit younger, so unfortunately, he's got some more majors in him. Let's just hope Nadal and Federer do too, because those are the three marquee guys in tennis. And without them, yeah, there's some young up-and-coming guys, but I think it was a great story that they denied him entry into Australia to play in this tennis tournament, and I think it was the right decision. Just before we move on to our random points that we touch base, our NFL picks for the week. A couple of meaningless games, but I'm going to go Chicago and Minnesota. I'm going to take Minnesota. I mean, you want to talk about an inconsistent team, but this will be Matt Nagy's last game in Chicago, and I don't put my money on Andy Dalton in any way, shape, or form. So I like for the Vikings to beat the Bears. And Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Now I know Jackson's not playing again, but Pittsburgh, they haven't had a great season. I don't see them winning. I think Baltimore needs this game way more than Pittsburgh. So I like Baltimore. And listen, Hundley's going to be the quarterback, and he's a good player. And I don't think Pittsburgh has enough, so I'm going to go with Baltimore. So those are my two picks for the week. Let's move on to our random points. Just items for discussion. We talked about Ken Rosenthal. Talked about Antonio Brown. Interesting thing, and I'm going to give a shout out to my alma mater, Niagara, who beat Notre Dame in hockey. And it seems a little insignificant, but you know what? they don't get to play teams like that very often. Notre Dame is a very good hockey team, but Niagara split the series, so that was good for the Purple Eagles. A couple other things. Lou Carnesecca, right? Lou Carnesecca turned 97 years old, and we remember the sweater and all that kind of stuff. And wanted to give a shout out for his 97th birthday. This guy's hanging in there. He's tough. And he was, like I said, a longtime coach of St. Joe's, a fixture at that school, and wanted to wish him happy birthday. Here's an item that came up recently. Whether or not Jim Harbaugh may make a jump back to the NFL. I wonder. You know what? At first I said, nah, I think, he's had the NFL thing. He went back to Michigan, his alma mater, but I don't think they're there. I don't think they're a national championship caliber team at this moment, and at first I kind of dismissed the idea of him coming back to the NFL. I'm not going to be surprised if he comes back and lands the Bears job. I think that's a real possibility. I don't think there's any other place that he would come back to the NFL for except, the team that drafted him and who he played for. So look for him. That could really possibly happen. Talking about the NFL, and I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago, this Clinton Portis, right? Former Redskins running back. Well, he's going to jail. He got mixed up in something that he shouldn't have, and they gave him 6 months in jail, 6 months home confinement, that kind of thing. So, like I said, when you break the law, it's always going to catch up to you. But, it kind of tarnished his image. Seems remorseful, but of course you are when you get caught. And one other quick note, like I said, we talked about Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. They hired James Laurinaitis, former outstanding linebacker at Ohio State. Seems to be a good factory, for future coaches, right? Luke Fickell and what he's done at Cincinnati, former Buckeye, and Laurinaitis joins Notre Dame staff. So I thought that was interesting because he's a pretty good player certainly in his day, and like I said, this is Marcus Freeman putting together a pretty good staff. What it looks like. So I also, folks, as we move on. And again, we usually close our segment with some notable passings, and unfortunately, some weeks it's more prevalent than others. But but we do it as a remembrance, right? Kind of a memorial. So there was a couple passings in the NFL. Ross Browner, and I remember Ross Browner. He was a great player. Won 2 national championships at Notre Dame. Had a great career with Cincinnati. Made the Super Bowl with them. 67 years old, and you know what? He was an excellent football player, and certainly wanted to mention him. He was 67 years old. Another one, and this is, my partner Steve, who's a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan, Ralph Neely, who was, a long-time player, won a couple Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys. Ralph Neely was 78 years old, and, just the epitome of a tough, gritty, played in all but 2 games of his entire career with the Dallas Cowboys. And you know what? I don't know why he doesn't get the recognition for the Hall of Fame, but he was a great player. And Ralph Neely was 78. And another passing in the NFL was Greg Robinson. And Greg Robinson, won a couple of Super Bowls as defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos. Really, football, he did go back and started his career in college and was head coach of Syracuse. It didn't work out there, didn't have a good run. I think he took over for Paul Pasqualoni. But Greg Robinson was 70 years old, and he was just a football guy. And unfortunate that he passed away. Couple notes from the world of Hollywood. Peter Bogdanovich was 80 years old and director of movies like The Last Picture Show and Paper Moon, and actually had a recurring role on The Sopranos show. He was 80 years old, notable. And this just came in yesterday. We want to talk about notable was Sidney Poitier, right? 94 years old. Just a great career. First black guy to win a Best Actor Oscar, but you know what? He was a civil rights guy, and he was always just a classy guy, and you know that's a big loss for Hollywood. But he had a good run. 94 years old, but he, you know, just one of the great actors of our generation, and wanted to make sure we noted him. And before we close out, when we talk about notable passings, Lawrence Brooks. And Lawrence Brooks was the oldest surviving veteran of World War II. 112 years old. And you know how we feel about our servicemen and women on Sports with Mono and Mono, and it would be remiss if we didn't mention Mr. Brooks and his contribution to the war effort. And you know, this was in an era, you know, unfortunately, where segregation was prevalent, but he gave it all for his country, and just, you know, he personifies, you know, the servicemen and women who defend this country. And 112 years old, what a classy guy. Certainly wanted to mention that. And again, like I said, we bring it up as, you know, not to go out on a down note, but just to make sure that we recognize people that have an impact on and off the sporting fields of play and entertainment, whatever. But yeah, busy week in that aspect. But listen, folks, we hope to get the show back online, and you know, with Steve and my brother Christopher. Speedy recovery from dealing with this situation. But please feel free to send us notes at sportswithmonoandmono@gmail.com. And again, you know, I miss my partner. You know, it's Mono and Mono, and you know, we've had to do it solo because of these unfortunate circumstances. But hopefully we'll be back with you guys together next week. And again, hope everybody out there stays healthy. Don't take this thing with COVID lightly, because it's no joke. But we wish the best to everybody and hope everybody stays healthy. And we'll catch up with you guys next week. So thanks for joining us. Take care.